The Arizona sun had long since fallen behind the bones of the Sierra Prieta, leaving only a smear of burnt orange against a bruised sky. The desert wind carried sand and sorrow, and Clara May Hollister rode through both with the quiet endurance of a woman who'd already buried half her life. Her husband, Samuel, had been dead 3 months, killed in a railroad blast outside Flagstaff. His body carried back to her in pieces, the rest swallowed by steel and fire. He'd left her a widow with a growing child and $10, not enough to buy grief's comfort or whiskey's mercy. In Prescott, she'd found only whispers and pity. Poor Mrs. Hollister, they said, ain't fit for mountain work. Not in her condition. But the notice tacked outside the dry goods store said otherwise. Caretaker needed. Remote Apache cabin. Winter stay. Good pay. Underneath, in faded ink, no woman's lasted a season. Most folks crossed themselves when they saw it. Clara tore it down and folded it into her palm. She figured a cursed job still paid better than starving decent. Now, as her wagon creaked up a frost-bitten trail, she watched the land change. The scrub gave way to pines and the pines to black rock. Snow flurries fell soft as ash. The air thinned. The world grew still. Even the mule sensed something, ears twitching, hooves hesitating at every bend. By the time the sun vanished, she saw it, the Apache cabin. It stood crooked against the slope, half swallowed by drifts, its boards gray and bullet-pocked. Wind moaned through the chinks like a restless soul. Apache markings, circles, handprints, and what looked like a woman's eyes had been carved into the lintel. She climbed down stiffly, rubbing her swollen belly, and whispered to the child inside, "It's just a cabin, little one. We've seen worse." The door opened with a cry, hinges rusted stiff. Inside it smelled of pine pitch and dust. A small stove crouched in the corner, cold and sullen. A single rocking chair faced the hearth, and beside it a cradle, empty but waiting. Her heart twisted. She dropped her bundle and knelt beside it, running a hand across the rough wood. "Looks like we're not the first," she murmured. Outside, the wind changed direction. It came down from the ridge, carrying a faint, almost human hum, like chanting. She shivered and latched the door, feeding a small fire from the dry logs she'd brought. When the flames took, the cabin came alive. Shadows flickered over the walls, and the carvings above the door seemed to move. Eyes narrowing, mouth bending into sorrow. Clara straightened her shoulders. "You can watch me all you like," she said to the emptiness. "But I ain't leaving till spring." That first night she dreamed of footsteps, slow, dragging, coming from beyond the firelight. When she turned in her sleep, she saw a tall man at the edge of her vision, broad-shouldered, face lost in shadow. He stood by the cradle, one hand reaching down as if to touch it. When she gasped awake, there was only the creak of the rocking chair, moving though no one sat in it. The next morning, frost had grown thick on the window panes like lace made of breath. Clara bundled herself in Samuel's old coat and went outside to fetch water. The forest was so still it seemed the whole world was holding its breath. Tracks crossed the snow, human, not animal, barefoot. She followed them to the edge of the woods where they simply stopped. No turn, no end, just gone. By noon, she'd cleared the chimney, stacked the wood, and scrubbed the floor till her fingers ached. Keeping busy helped her not to think. About Samuel. About the letter she'd burned that morning. The one from his mother calling her a cursed thing that brings men to ruin. But at sunset, she found something under the hearthstone. A silver locket, tarnished. Engraved with the initials TW inside was the portrait of a woman. Apache. Proud and beautiful, eyes bright as obsidian. Behind her, the same cabin stood, new-built and sunlit. Clara set it aside, uneasy. That night, the fire burned low. The wind outside rose to a howl, and beneath it came something else, a voice low and mournful, singing in a tongue she didn't know. She held her belly, whispering, "Hush now. It's just the wind." But the baby kicked strong, as if hearing the song and knowing it. By the third day, the snow came hard, piling against the door. Clara couldn't leave even if she wanted to. The cabin groaned beneath the storm's weight. The world outside had vanished, and inside the whispers grew louder. She tried reading the Bible aloud to drown them out. Genesis, Exodus, Psalms, but her voice trembled. When she paused, the singing answered her from the dark corners as if mocking her prayers. That's when she noticed something new. Footprints by the hearth again, but bigger this time. A man's. She stared at them for a long time, heart thudding like a drum, and when the fire flared bright for just a moment, she saw it clearly. Someone outside the window. A man's face. Strong, scarred eyes black as the mountain itself. She leapt to her feet, rifle shaking in her hands. The door rattled. Then 3 hard knocks, her blood turned to ice. No one had come up that road since she'd arrived. The knocking came again. Slower. Weaker. Finally, she lifted the latch, braced herself, and pulled the door open. A man collapsed into her arms, half frozen, bleeding from his shoulder. The snow around him was red as sin. He looked up at her with fever-bright eyes and whispered one word before falling unconscious. Taya. And that was how Clara May Hollister, a pregnant widow with no place left to go, found herself trapped in a haunted mountain cabin with a dying man and a past that refused to stay buried. Outside, the storm swallowed the world whole. Inside, 2 broken souls shared one fire, one heartbeat, and one secret neither yet understood. When dawn crept pale and brittle through the frost-reamed window, Clara May was still sitting by the fire, staring at the stranger who'd bled onto her floorboards. He was young, maybe 30, though hard living had carved him into something older. His hair was black as crow feathers, his jaw rough with stubble, and across his chest ran a deep gunshot wound, half healed, half rotten. His skin had the bronze tone of desert sun, Apache blood or close to it. She'd cleaned the wound as best she could using whiskey from Samuel's old flask and rags torn from her skirts. The bleeding had slowed, though his breathing still came shallow and ragged. When his eyes finally opened, dark as midnight, Clara nearly dropped the cup she was holding. "You best lie still," she said, trying to sound firm. "You've been shot clean through. If the fever don't kill you, moving will." He studied her for a long moment, gaze sharp but not unkind. "You ain't from here." His voice was low, sanded smooth by the prairie wind. "Prescott," she answered. "Name's Clara May Hollister." He blinked, trying to focus. "You shouldn't be here, Mrs. Hollister." She arched a brow. "That's what everyone says. Still here anyhow." He tried to sit, winced, and sank back down. "You don't understand. This cabin, it's marked, so I've heard." She leaned closer. "But you've got a bullet in you. And ghosts or no ghosts, I ain't letting a man freeze to death under my roof." That earned her a faint, weary smile. "You got grit, lady. And you got a lot of nerve for a man who bled out on my doorstep." He chuckled weakly, then coughed, pain racking his body. She steadied him with one hand until the fit passed. When he could breathe again, he said, "Name's Elias Gray." They spent the next few days trapped together as the snow deepened around the cabin. Elias slept most of the time, fevered and muttering in Apache tongue, words Clara couldn't understand. But when he woke, they talked, slowly, cautiously, like 2 wolves learning to share a den. He told her he was a trapper, half Apache, half white, and that bounty men had been after him for months. He wouldn't say why. Clara didn't press. She knew what it was to run from a past best left buried. "What's this place's story?" she asked one night as they sat by the fire, the storm howling outside. Elias stared into the flames, jaw tightening. "You sure you want to know?" "I've been living here 3 weeks with something breathing down my neck every night. I'd say I've earned the truth," he nodded slowly. "This cabin was built 20 years ago by a soldier, Lieutenant Robert Wainwright. He took an Apache wife named Taya. She was kind, brave, and she loved him even after his men raided her people. But when the army came calling, he betrayed her, sold her out to save his hide." Elias's voice dropped to a whisper. "They killed her right outside that door. She cursed the land with her dying breath. Since then, every woman who tried to live here alone never saw the spring thaw." Clara shivered. "And the locket I found under the hearth was hers," he said softly. "Taya Wainwright. My mother." The fire popped. Clara's hand went to her chest. "Your mother?" Elias nodded. "I was 5 when she died. I've come here every winter since to keep her grave safe, to make sure the curse don't spread." She stared at him, unable to speak. A long silence filled the cabin, heavy as the snow on the roof. Finally, she said, "Why'd you help me then, if this place kills every woman who stays?" He looked up at her, something fierce and sorrowful in his eyes. "Because maybe the land's tired of death. Maybe it sent me to keep you alive." The days bled together after that. White snow, gray sky, red firelight. The world outside was gone, buried in ice. They lived by rhythm, chopping wood, mending traps, boiling coffee, patching old memories into something like peace. Clara grew used to his quiet ways, the way he handled tools like prayers, the way he'd hum old Apache songs to the unborn child as if the baby could understand. "You talk to it like it's listening," she said once. Watching him with an amused smile, he shrugged. "Maybe it is. Little one's got both kinds of blood in its veins, Apache and white, spirit and bone. Maybe it hears things we can't." Her hand went to her belly, feeling the soft kick beneath her palm. "You make it sound like that's a blessing." He looked at her then, eyes full of something warm. "Out here, life itself is a blessing." For the first time in months, she smiled without pain. One night near the end of January, the storm finally broke. The world outside lay still and silent, glittering under a full moon. Elias stepped out to check his traps. Clara watched him through the window, breath fogging the glass. There was a gentleness in the way he moved through the snow, like a man who belonged to the land instead of fighting it. When he came back, his face was pale. "Something's wrong," he said. He showed her what he'd found. One of his traps twisted open, the metal bent by no human hand. And beside it, bare footprints in the snow, small, feminine, leading straight toward the cabin. Clara's heart pounded. "You think it's her?" Elias didn't answer. He just set his rifle by the door and sat by the fire, eyes never leaving the window. As the hours dragged on, the cabin seemed to breathe. The logs creaked. The cradle rocked once, slowly by itself. Then the fire flared, shadows writhing up the wall. Clara heard a whisper in her ear, soft, almost tender. "He lied to me. He will lie to you." She spun around. No one was there. Elias was still staring at the window. When she told him, his face darkened. "She's testing you," he said. "The spirit don't want another woman dying here, but she don't trust any of us, least of all me." Clara's fear hardened into defiance. Then she'll have to learn. Elias met her gaze across the firelight. "You remind me of her, you know. Strong, stubborn. Is that your way of saying I don't know when to quit?" He smiled faintly. "It's my way of saying maybe you're the one who can break this curse." Later, when the fire burned low and the world was hushed, Clara woke to find Elias sitting at the edge of her bedroll. The light from the embers painted his face in golden shadow. "You should sleep," she murmured. He shook his head. "Can't. Dreams ain't safe for me." She reached out without thinking, resting her hand on his. "They're just dreams." He looked at her, eyes dark and unguarded. Not in this cabin. The air between them felt charged, part fear, part something far gentler. She could have pulled her hand away. She didn't. Outside, the wind began to sing again, but softer now, like approval. And for the first time since she'd arrived, Clara May Hollister wasn't afraid of the dark. By February, winter had sunk its claws deep into the mountain. Snow buried the trees up to their branches, and the Apache cabin crouched beneath the weight of white silence like a beast in hibernation. Inside, the fire never truly went out. It became the heart of their world. Orange light on pine walls, the hiss of sap, the low hum of Elias's voice when he thought Clara was asleep. But sleep rarely came easy. Strange things began to stir in those long nights. Sometimes Clara would wake to the sound of the cradle rocking on its own, the wooden runners creaking slow and steady, though no wind touched it. Other times she'd find her husband's old Bible open to passages she hadn't marked. Words about betrayal, blood and the wages of sin. One morning, she found the name Taya written in the frost on the window pane, clear as if drawn by a finger. She tried to laugh it off, but the unease settled deep. Elias grew quieter, mood darkening as the days passed. He spent hours staring into the flames or sharpening his knife, his thoughts locked somewhere Clara couldn't reach. When she asked what troubled him, he'd only say, "The land remembers, and it's stirring." It was on the 5th night of February that the peace shattered. Clara woke to a sudden silence, a deep, unnatural hush, as if the whole world had stopped breathing. The fire had gone out. The room was black. Then she heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Crossing the floor toward her bed, her hand shot for the rifle, but a voice stopped her cold. "Don't," it said softly. "It's me. Elias." But there was something different in his tone. Something hollow, haunted. She could barely make out his shape in the dark. "What are you doing?" He crouched near the cradle, fingers tracing its edge. "She's here," he whispered. "My mother. I can feel her." Clara's throat went dry. "Elias, don't you hear her, Clara May?" His voice trembled. "She's singing. She wants us to listen." And then Clara heard it too. The same low melody that had haunted her dreams. Rising now from the walls themselves, soft as breath, mournful as the wind. The fire sprang to life on its own, flames licking high and wild. The shadows danced, twisting, shaping until they formed the outline of a woman. Long black hair, eyes like embers, face beautiful and broken. Elias fell to his knees. "Mother," he breathed. The spirit's gaze turned to Clara. "You carry life into a house of death," she said, her voice both human and not. "Why?" Clara steadied herself, heart hammering. "Because I've nowhere else to go, and because I believe this place can still hold something good." The spirit's eyes softened, then darkened. Men said that once too. Elias looked up, tears streaking his face. "We're not them, Mother!" The fire roared brighter, shadows stretching. "Then prove it," she whispered, and just like that she was gone. The cabin plunged into silence. Smoke hung thick in the air. Clara fell against the wall, trembling. Elias stayed on his knees, his face pale, his breath uneven. "What did she mean?" Clara whispered. He looked at her, eyes distant. "That the curse ain't over yet." The next morning, they found the snow outside disturbed, tracks circling the cabin, small and barefoot, leading toward the forest. Elias followed them to a rise overlooking the frozen creek. There, half buried under a drift, he uncovered a mound of stones, the grave of Taya Wainwright. Carved into the largest rock was a single line, worn by time. "Love turned to ash shall haunt the betrayer's home." Elias knelt beside it, his hand trembling as he brushed away the snow. "I was just a boy," he murmured. "I couldn't stop them." Clara watched from behind, her shawl pulled tight. "You don't have to carry that forever, Elias." He looked up, anguish etched in every line of his face. "You don't understand. I'm the reason she can't rest. When the soldiers came, I ran, I hid. She died calling my name." Clara stepped closer, placing a hand on his shoulder. "She doesn't want your guilt. She wants peace." But even as she said it, the wind rose, sharp, sudden, filled with whispers. From the corner of her eye, Clara saw movement among the trees, figures faint and gray circling them like wolves. Apache warriors, ghosts, their faces painted with sorrow. Elias stood, rifle in hand. "Get back to the cabin." The air turned icy, the world spinning white. Clara stumbled, clutching her belly, the wind tearing at her clothes. And through the storm she heard the spirit's voice again, soft, pleading. "Do not let the child be born here." They barely made it back before the blizzard hit. The door slammed shut behind them, snow pouring through the cracks. Elias shoved furniture against the frame, cursing under his breath. Outside, the storm screamed like the dying. Inside, the fire flared high again, unfed, unnatural. The walls shook, timbers groaning. From above came a sound like weeping or laughter. It was hard to tell which. Elias grabbed his mother's locket from the mantel and threw it into the flames. "Take it, take what's yours and let her go." The fire exploded, a gust of wind knocking Clara to the floor. When she opened her eyes, she saw Elias silhouetted against the light. His mother's figure behind him, hand outstretched as if to touch his cheek. He whispered something in Apache, a word that sounded like forgive. The spirit smiled. Then both she and the flames went out at once, leaving only smoke and silence. Hours passed before either spoke again. Clara sat huddled by the cold hearth, staring into the dark. "Is it over?" Elias stared at the ashes. No, that was just her warning. He reached for her hand. His skin was ice cold, his eyes distant. "She said not to let the child be born here." "That means something's coming." Clara's heart twisted. "And you believe her?" He nodded once. "The mountain's not done with us yet." Outside, the storm howled again, distant thunder rolling down the peaks. But beneath the fear, something else stirred between them. The knowledge that they'd faced death side by side and lived. Clara looked at him, the man who had walked out of the pines like a ghost and saved her more times than she could count. "If it's coming," she said softly, "then we face it together." He met her gaze, eyes warm for the first time in days. Together, he promised, and as the wind screamed and the cabin creaked, Elias reached for her and she didn't pull away. For one fragile moment, amid all the curses and ghosts and cold, two lost souls found something neither had dared believe in again. Love. By March, the snows had turned cruel. The mountains wore white crowns that crushed the pines beneath them, and the air itself felt brittle enough to break. Clara May Hollister woke each morning wondering if the roof would hold another day under the weight of winter's anger. The haunting had quieted since Elias burned the locket, but the silence that replaced it was worse. It felt like the mountain was waiting. For her, for the child, for something unspoken to break loose. Elias had grown restless. He paced the cabin like a caged wolf, eyes fixed on the horizon through the frost-glazed window. Some nights she'd wake to find him outside, bareheaded in the snow, whispering in Apache to the wind. When she begged him to come back in, he'd only say, "She ain't gone. Clara May, the land's holding its breath." Then one morning, she found his rifle gone and his note. The paper was torn from her old ledger. Words scrawled in a shaky hand. "Can't let the curse take you or the child. Going to draw it away. If I don't return, burn the cabin, head south by the creek. Don't look back." Elias, her knees nearly gave out. "No," she whispered, clutching the paper to her chest. "Don't you leave me too." But the cabin was empty except for the sound of the wind. By noon the storm hit, a roaring white fury that buried the world. Clara tried to wait, pacing, praying, begging. But as night fell and the fire flickered low, a cry rose from outside. It wasn't the wind, it was human. Elias's name tore from her throat before she knew she'd said it. She grabbed her coat, wrapped the blanket around her belly and stepped out into the storm. The cold hit her like a hammer, slicing through wool and skin alike. The snow was waist-deep, the wind howling like a wounded beast. Still, she pushed forward. She followed the faint trail of footprints through the dark, Elias's tracks, half buried by drifting snow. Every step sent pain shooting up her back, but she didn't care. The baby stirred in her belly, restless, as if it too knew something terrible was near. After an hour, she saw it, a glow in the distance, flickering red and wild. She stumbled toward it and found a fire burning at the mouth of a narrow ravine. Elias was there, kneeling in the snow, rifle cast aside. His coat was torn, blood seeping through the bandages at his shoulder. Around him, shapes moved, shadows, dozens of them, circling in the smoke. They weren't alive. They were the Apache dead, men and women, faint and gray, their eyes hollow, their bodies like mist and memory. Clara froze, heart thundering. Elias turned at the sound of her approach. "I told you to stay away!" he shouted over the wind. "You think I'd let you die out here alone?" she cried, stumbling toward him. He caught her in his arms, holding her close, snow melting between them. His breath came in ragged gasps. "It's them, Clara, my mother's people. They won't rest till the curse is ended." The air shimmered and one of the spirits stepped forward, the woman with long black hair and eyes like dying embers. "Taya," her voice carried on the storm. "You brought her here, Elias, another woman to the house of death." Elias shook his head. "She's not like the others." "She carries life. She carries danger," Taya replied. "That cabin was born from betrayal. No child should take its first breath there." Clara fell to her knees, the snow stinging her skin. "Please, I didn't mean to trespass. I just needed a place to live. A place to survive." Taya's gaze softened. "Just a little. You bear innocence. The land remembers mercy, too." "Then let him live," Clara pleaded, gripping Elias's arm. "If there must be a sacrifice, take me instead." The storm howled louder, swallowing her words. The spirits shifted, whispering among themselves in a language older than the wind. Elias pushed her behind him, blood dripping onto the snow. "No," he said fiercely. "If anyone pays, it's me. I'm the son who ran. I'm the one who left her to die." Taya's eyes glimmered. "And what will you offer?" Elias raised his hands. "My life, my blood for hers. For theirs. Let the child be born free." "No," Clara cried, trying to reach him, but the spirits closed in. A ring of flickering forms, their voices rising in mournful song. The snow spun faster, blinding her. She could feel the world breaking apart, the earth groaning, the sky trembling. Elias's shape blurred in the stormlight. Then came the flash. A burst of fire, red and gold, swallowed the ravine. The wind died. When the snow settled, Clara found herself alone. The fire was gone. The spirits were gone. Only Elias remained, lying motionless in the snow, a faint pulse beneath his skin. She crawled to him, tears freezing on her cheeks. "Elias, please!" His eyes fluttered open. "It's over," he whispered. "She forgave us. Don't you dare leave me." He smiled faintly, his hand finding hers. "You got more fight than anyone I ever met, Clara May. You'll raise that child strong. Tell her about me. Tell her the land remembers good things too." His voice faded. His eyes closed. For a moment, Clara thought he was gone. But then the wind stilled entirely, the world falling silent as a church, somewhere deep in the mountains. The sun broke through the clouds, just a thin, golden blade of light. Clara held him tight and whispered, "We'll both make it home." It took her 2 days to find her way back. She followed the creek as his note had said. The storm eased, the path opening as if guided by unseen hands. When she finally saw the cabin again, it was changed. Quiet, peaceful. No whispers. No rocking cradle. Inside, she built one last fire. She laid Elias by the hearth, his face calm, his scars pale in the glow. Then she sat beside him, wrapped in his coat, and waited for dawn. The baby came with the sunrise. Pain tore through her, fierce and unrelenting. But she didn't scream. She bore it with the same quiet grit that had carried her through the snow, and when the first cry split the morning, she laughed through her tears. A little girl. Tiny, warm, alive. She pressed the child to her chest and whispered, "You made it, my love. You made it." Outside, the mountain wind sighed like a blessing. By the time she looked toward Elias again, she swore she saw something. His shadow standing by the door, smiling, the same gentle warmth she'd seen in life. And beside him, another figure, Taya, her dark hair lifting in the breeze. They nodded once. Then both faded with the dawn. Clara wiped her eyes and held her daughter close. When the snows finally began to melt, the Apache cabin stood alone beneath a sky of soft gray light. Patches of earth appeared first on the southern slopes, then in the hollows where the sun lingered longest. The pines dripped with thaw, and the air smelled faintly of wet soil and new beginnings. Inside the cabin, Clara May Hollister rocked her newborn in a blanket made from Elias's old coat. The baby's cheeks were pink, her eyes dark as fresh-turned earth. She was small but strong, her tiny fingers curling around her mother's thumb with the stubborn grip of life itself. Clara had named her Taya Gray, after the spirit who had saved them both. Every morning, Clara would step outside, wrap the child close, and whisper to the wind, "We made it. We're still here." And sometimes, when the breeze shifted through the trees, she could swear it answered back with a soft hum, half lullaby, half memory. It took weeks before her strength returned. Winter had stripped her thin, but there was iron in her blood now, and the fire in her heart burned steady. She spent her days repairing what the storm had broken, mending the roof, setting the traps, clearing the path to the creek. Each chore kept her from thinking too long about the man buried just beyond the pines. She'd chosen the spot herself. High ground overlooking the valley, where the morning sun would strike first. She'd carved his name into a slab of pine, Elias Gray, son of two worlds the mountain remembers beneath it. She'd placed the last thing he'd carried, a small leather pouch containing ashes from his mother's fire. Together, she thought, they could finally rest. Yet sometimes when she stood there at dusk with the baby in her arms, she could feel him near, not like a ghost, but like the warmth of a man's hand still lingering after the touch. "You done what you came to do, Elias," she whispered one evening. "You set her free, and maybe me too." The wind stirred gently through the trees, scattering pine needles over the grave. Word of her survival spread by mid-spring. A pair of trappers passing through the high country stumbled upon her smoke trail and carried the story down to Prescott. They said the widow who'd taken the death job had lived, that she'd birthed a child up there where no woman lasted a season. When Clara finally rode into town for supplies, leading her old mule and cradling baby Taya, every head in the street turned. "Good Lord above," muttered old Tom Davis at the general store. "Thought that cabin was cursed." "Maybe it was," Clara said softly, counting out her coins. "But curses break same as winter, if you wait 'em out long enough." The townsfolk asked 100 questions. Was it true the cabin was haunted? How did she survive alone? Where was the man folks claimed they'd seen with her before the blizzard hit? Clara just smiled faintly and said, "The mountain took what it was owed, and gave back what it could spare." That answer seemed to satisfy no one and everyone all at once. She stayed the summer in town, working at the boarding house and trading stories for food, but the cabin called to her still. The smell of pine, the hush of snowmelt, the quiet grave under the ridge. By fall, she was back. This time, the cabin felt different. The carvings over the door no longer looked angry. The eyes seemed watchful but kind. The air inside was warm, the walls still whispering, but softer now, like a home learning to trust again. Taya grew fast. By her first winter, she could toddle between the hearth and the cradle, laughing at the crackle of fire. Clara taught her songs Samuel once sang, and when the nights were long, she'd hum the tune the spirit woman had used to calm the storm. It always made the fire burn a little brighter. Years passed that way. Seasons turned like pages in an old Bible. Travelers came and went through the valley, sometimes stopping to ask for water or shelter. They'd listen to Clara's stories by the fire, about Elias Gray, the half-Apache man who made peace with ghosts, and they'd shake their heads in wonder. One spring evening, a young rancher passing through said, "Ma'am, you ought to sell this place and come down to town. You could have a warm bed, a church close by. This land ain't meant for a woman and child alone." Clara smiled, rocking Taya in her arms. "I ain't alone," she said. Never was. When the man left, he looked back once. For just a heartbeat, he thought he saw a tall figure standing beside the woman on the porch. A man in a buckskin coat, dark hair blowing in the wind, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. But when he blinked, there was only moonlight and pine shadow. As Taya grew older, she would ask about the man in the stories. Elias, the trapper who saved them. Was he brave? She'd ask. Clara smiled. Braver than most. Was he good? He was good enough to give everything he had to protect someone he barely knew. That kind of good don't die easy. Taya would nod solemnly, then say, "Does he still watch us?" Clara looked toward the mountains where the sun dipped behind the ridges. "Every day, little one. The mountain remembers." By the time Taya turned 5, the valley had changed. Where once the snow had buried all life, now wildflowers carpeted the slopes, blue lupine and Indian paintbrush. The creek ran clear and sweet. Even the animals returned, as if the land itself had been healed. That spring, Clara rode down to Prescott to register her claim on the property. The clerk, a young man with ink-stained hands, frowned when she gave the name. "Apache cabin," he said, glancing up. "Ma'am, that place has a bad record." "You sure you want that deed in your name?" Clara smiled, signing the paper with a steady hand. "That cabin's seen enough death. Time it learned how to live." The clerk nodded, though he didn't understand. When she left, the town's preacher stopped her on the steps. "Mrs. Hollister," he said kindly, "they say you broke a curse up there." "That true?" She looked down at Taya, who was playing with a feather she'd found. "No, Reverend. I just stopped running from one." That night, back at the cabin, the sky was full of stars. The air was soft and cool, the last breath of spring before summer heat. Clara sat on the porch with Taya asleep in her lap, the firelight flickering through the open door. She thought about the long road that had brought her here. Grief, fear, love, and all the ghosts that had followed her through the snow. Somewhere beyond the trees, a coyote called. Another answered. She smiled, leaned back, and whispered to the night, "We're home, Elias. You can rest now." The wind stirred, gentle as a sigh. For just an instant, she caught the scent of smoke and pine and something else, faint, familiar, like the warmth of his hand brushing her cheek. She closed her eyes, and as the fire crackled and the stars shimmered, the mountains kept their silent watch over the woman and her child, the widow who had faced the dark and won, and the daughter who carried both bloodlines. Proof that love could outlast death, curses, and even winter itself.